and then came down, and now this obviously this is 500. So this does not mean this is zero. This is something positive, but again very small amount compared to what earlier. And this gives you some other idea about money and inflation. If we look at the money and inflation together, can you see the blue and the purple line together? So money supply growth and inflation, you can hyperinflation almost coincide. So at a very high rate of inflation, the main responsible reason is the money supply. Yeah, this is
or is it just that when the inflation goes very high, the money supply increases to catch up with it?
No, it's the other way around.
How does the money supply increase?
Who prints money supply?
Government.
Some government agency, National Bank. When will they print more money? When they have short of money. They short of money when government will be short of money. When government has deficit.
More expenditure.
Deficit. Government doesn't import it.
Sir, more expenditure.
Government expenditure is more than government revenue.
Is the government at liberty to keep printing money?
Technically, yes. Technically, there is no kind of a strain on the government.
But there must be some kind of framework laid down.
Yes, that's what we discussed. That's the next topic. After next week, that is the topic. So that framework we discuss next time. So these are just giving you the link between money supply and the inflation rate.
If there is any international framework also?
After you have international framework. Nobody can, no country is more than country to kind of control its government unless you are kind of going for borrowing or something like that. But then nowadays countries do it through World Bank and IMF. They don't do directly.
But typically entities like World Bank and IMF can definitely be getting loans based on their policies going forward.
Yes, definitely. This is again another very interesting picture, actually real world picture of Germany. In 1923, Germany's money was worth so little that children were using stacks of banknotes as building blocks. That's another example of when money uses the world. And this is actually a chapter which you see what we discussed more or less in the same way. So I just thought and this is Brazilian again, prices and the inflation, money supply growth and price almost matching. This is blue slightly here and blue slightly here. Otherwise just coinciding. And what are the effects of inflation? We discussed all that. It's already there. This is some interesting graph. When inflation becomes higher, what happens? You have to go to the bank more often to withdraw money. You have to go to more. If it is kind of once a week, now we have to go every day or every hour, every day. So all this is kind of details given here. So might be used for. So there is a case for deflation. In 1960, McKinsey produced analysis of two level cost of inflation or radical including optimal range of inflation is negative. Which means deflation is the most optimal. That is debt free inflation. This argument ran as follows. Even at 0% inflation, people insert two level cost when they compromise on the use of money in order to avoid opposite cost of interest to go on. Yet it does not cause the economy anything to provide people with fiat money. So Friedman argued that even at 0% inflation, people's effort to limit their money's old age lead to inefficiency. So eliminate this inefficiency, Friedman concluded that government should try to push the nominal interest rate to 0%. The only way to do this is to sustain basis would be to have a negative inflation rate. This would reduce the nominal interest rate through the fiscal effect, leading people to hold a larger real quantity of money. Although an ingenious analysis, this has never been used as a fiscal policy. Negative inflation, which is called deflation, poses the risk of economic policy which most economists believe outweigh any gain from reduced two-level cost.
This calculation is not understood.
This one is basically saying that Friedman, there was an economist who got a Nobel Prize. He says it's best inflation to be negative. And obviously that has not been practiced. Otherwise you will have a lot of prices.
Why does he say this?
Because he says that the people, when they keep cash, it's inefficient. They should not keep any cash with themselves. They should invest it somewhere. So when will they invest? That's what he says, inflation should be negative. Then basically, that's the basic argument he says.
Like the state of America, the rate of interest on the existing are on housing loans and all about 3 to 4%. So they move towards this kind of a model?
No, that is a right situation. That is not
It is
taking.
there for last 20 years. When 15 years back, the rate of interest in America was 3 to 4%.
No, but it has been increasing. In 2007, what was the interest rate? It was went to about 8%.
8%. That is a growth. In 2019.
No. The Federal Reserve, that is trying to started raising the interest rate from 2005 onward, upward and upward. And towards the 2006 end or early 2007, it reached a peak. And then the crisis really kind of got the final, what you call, torching or whatever. And then they had to reduce it immediately.
Today it is 3 to 4%.
Yes, 3 to 4%, but again, people who are having very high credit worthiness. If you are kind of a risky borrower, then interest rate will be 20% for you. The next, something called subprime. Subprime, I think the name comes from there. People who are not risk, kind of who are risky borrowers. And this is you can see now something which we already talked about earlier, inflation rate and the short-term interest rate. Almost using matching. Yes.
Can you tell me more about subprime?
Not now. Later on, when the topic is we are covering the financial topic. We are now right now in the first part. Second part is basically what we are talking about. So this is short-term interest rate and inflation. You will see more or less whenever inflation rate goes up, the tendency of the central bank is to raise the interest rate.
So it's less than 2% in 2004.
Yeah, but then again after that started going up. Why it came down 2001 onwards? You see, the recession in 2001 also.
Yes.
September 11, I think you forgot it.
Yes.
You cannot forget that. And before that, the financial crisis, the recession in the US had already started. And September 11 actually worsened things more. And then immediately the main impact comes through central bank policy to reduce the interest rate. So 2004 when you're saying, you are actually still, and interest rate started rising again. And so at 4 years later, it will increase. And then again, 2007 comes. Again, anyway, this chapter I put it in so moderate inflation is kind of what we like, and that's good for the policy. And this is the great disinflation in the US. So this was say in the 70s, inflation was double digit, and then in the 80s they reduced the inflation rate. And what was the impact? You reduce the inflation rate. You can see that in this graph. Will match the two. That is telling you output gap, which is what is your potential and what you are actually achieving in terms of GDP. Yes. So if you are controlling inflation, and we talked about the vicious circle a short while back. If you control inflation too much, what happens to this component? Workers are expecting some increase, but inflation is less than that. Your cost of production will go up, and that's the impact of that. Your output will fall, although potential is higher, but you will be producing less. And that's happening in the last 3-4 years also. What has happened? The salaries have not come down significantly, but the growth has come down significantly in the US, and unemployment rate has shot up. Anyway, I think this is the final deflation, effect of deflation. We discussed all this already, so this Japanese issue, Japanese trap, and that's the title: inflation, disinflation, and deflation. Which you saw the diagram has similar heading. So that should be able to. Now we come to the next topic, which maybe I will use the board. All the chapters are there, so we can use the board as well as the. There is a small request. People who are sitting here, they can come here because they are not able to see anything. So, but somehow I felt that that's a. I think there are plenty of seats here. No? They're registered. Okay. But they are not there. I think for this session they have to.
Where there is a will, there is a way.
I think this seat is empty. Okay, now we go into more details. Actually, the modeling starts now. So far, we have discussed whatever we discussed is conceptual. So, what is the GDP by expenditure method for Y equal to C plus I plus G minus M. So now this is the equation from the expenditure side, and we'll actually now go into more details of this. And obviously we'll start with a very simple model where we'll start with consumption. Consumption, there are 4 theories of consumption. First is known as absolute income hypothesis. Second is permanent income hypothesis. Third is relative income hypothesis. Fourth is life cycle hypothesis. This is the 4 theories. We'll discuss each one of them, and then we'll see which one is most practical from the real world point of view. The first one is obviously when get is by Keynes. Second one is by Friedman, which just now we talked about him, Milton Friedman. Third one, I think is Dusenberry and 2 others. And the fourth one is Modigliani. All of them got Nobel Prize, except Keynes. Why Keynes didn't get Nobel Prize? Well, economics actually, in economics, it's actually not a Nobel Prize. It confuses economics, Nobel Prize economics. Yeah. Economics actually is Nobel Memorial Prize. And it was started in 1969. And Keynes died in 1946. So obviously, like in India, we give Bharat Ratna posthumously. Nobel Committee decided not to do that. So otherwise, he would have definitely got it. And there are other things, some of you who are really interested, since you are from defense, you might find Keynes very interesting to read also. There is a video called Age of Uncertainty. The video, which was produced at BBC long time back. It's available on YouTube and it's produced by a famous economist from. He was an ambassador to India, US ambassador to India, John Kenneth Galbraith. So this is available now on the net, YouTube. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm trying to buy a copy of the library, but I couldn't find it anywhere.
This is quite a long one, but it is good.
But I'm just one which is about Keynes is called basically Mandarin Revolution. I'm not asking you to see there are about I think 10 episodes or something. There's one on Karl Marx, very interesting if you want to see. But this one I'm about Keynes is Mandarin Revolution. And one of the interesting thing Galbraith says that when the Second World War ended, there was negotiation going on, isn't it? Both parties, the Allies and the losers, the Germans, Japanese and all. And obviously, nobody had a clue what's going on from the economic point of view. Nobody had a clue. Well, nobody had a macroeconomic understanding at this point, especially global macroeconomics. So effectively, Galbraith calls this meeting was actually a meeting of all the countries with one person. And that person was obviously Keynes. So Keynes only had the perspective. And what we are doing today, that he actually conceptualizes it at 1946-47. That we should have something like an IMF, which will be international central bank, and we'll have some kind of an international currency, which will take care of the Chinese problem and the American problem, deficit, surplus and all. But obviously that idea was rejected by the Americans, who were the winner of the war, and And Keynes came from a losing side, which is basically European side. He was a British economist. So obviously Britain was losing its relevance in the world politics, and America was gaining the center stage in the world politics. So obviously, even if Keynes was right, his ideas were kind of rejected by the Americans, although they're coming back and telling us that this is going to happen, and increasingly we are finding that his ideas are getting more and more relevant. And if you are regularly reading Krugman's, Paul Krugman, again, he got a Nobel Memorial Prize in 2009 or something. He basically will find also his argument are basically Keynesian arguments. He's basically Keynesian in his approach. He's a professor at Princeton. And you'll see a lot of his writing, he writes in a very simple, kind of a easy language for everybody to understand. But his ideas are basically what we want to discuss just now. You'll find a lot of kind of a relationship with that. So the first theory is absolute income hypothesis, which basically says consumption. What do you think consumption depends on? You will find that possibly very intuitive. That's what Keynes is. What do you think our consumption of individual and obviously by default all of our consumption depends on what? Income. So obviously Keynes says that the income is the most important variable. But again, you possibly not spend entire income. So there will be some proportion of income which you will spend. Suppose you get 100 rupees extra, additional 100 rupees. What will you spend entire 100 or less or more? You cannot spend entire, you cannot spend more because you got extra 100 only. You have to spend exactly the same amount or less. And he named it marginal propensity to consume. Which means if I get additional 1 rupee, how much of that I will spend on consumption. Okay, that's one part. What about people who have no income? Propensity means just the English dictionary word. Basically, if you have extra kind of a consumption need from the income, how much of that will go for that? Willingness to, not willingness, actually spending. If I get income of say my income was 1,000, I get 1,100. So of these 100, I'll spend either all the 100 or little less than that. And that depends on my level of income. If I'm very rich, I may not spend anything. If I'm very poor, I may spend the entire money. So that's the. But he's assuming it's an average for the society. So some will have more, some will have less. Dictionary meaning tendency. So you can say tendency is another way to talk about it. So tendency for people to spend. I'm not an English language expert, so I'm just trying to give a more intuitive perspective. Suppose people have zero income, so they still need to survive. So what will they do? Reserve. So that part he calls it CA, which means it's called subsistence consumption. That even if my income is zero, I still need to survive. That is just a consumption. I may borrow from the kind of others, or if I have some past wealth, I will draw it down. If I have some savings, I will spend that. That's your basically simple Keynesian consumption concept. Subsistence consumption. That subsistence means, again, English language means just to survive. Just to survive. So obviously this is also, we can call it, referred to as A, is the reason why I call it A is autonomous consumption. Autonomous means it does not depend on anything. It basically based on your consumption need by availability. Is this clear? Any questions? So that's the consumption function coming from the.
Why add this?
Why add this?
So subsistence consumption plus marginal.
This part is function of income. This part is function of
Total
nothing.
consumption.
Nothing.
If
If income is zero, this part will be zero. If this part is zero, you still consume something.
together will comprise the total
Total right.
Society.
Society, economy, whatever you want to call it, of everybody. Macroeconomic
population.
I hope this is clear. And if this is consumption, what will the saving function look like? saving depends on that. What?
Income matter.
We just discussed earlier. Just like MPC, there will be something called, again, based on income, MPS. What will be MPS? If you have extra income, how much you are saving. Marginal propensity to save. Same idea. And then, plus, if your income is 0, what must you do? So you must be doing negative saving. Minus. Well, let's keep assuming which is actually your this saving. So this is also you can call it SA, or this is nothing but your this saving. Which means at 0 level of income, you are not saving anything. Whatever little bit you have wealth left, you are consuming that. And if you add these two together, savings plus consumption, what do you get? You get by income method. Okay, just add the two. This and this will cancel. MPC, suppose if this is 0.8, what must this be? 0.2. It has to be there. So MPC plus MPS has to be equal to 1. So now you relate the three. That's your Keynesian model. You will see how much interesting things come out of that. Now it's a difficult part, so I want to make sure everything is clear. Although it's not very complicated, but you'll be very clear because you see once you understand this concept, how useful they become later. This is called absolute income hypothesis. First segment will come later. No, segment. This is the first one.
Minus CA.
Yeah, minus CA is your, in a way, SA, which is nothing but your this saving, which is a negative end. Because if your income is 0, you are not saving. You only can consume, which is actually your this saving.
Just straightforward saving plus consumption is income.
Yes.
Why do you call it such complicated?
It's like saying, what is the illusion of a newborn baby? It's a newborn baby, and you see it when it grows up, you will be able to see, you will be able to explain our words. That's the.
So, consumption is
So what? CA plus.
So this plus this. Yeah. Now you see, I don't want to kind of start from the kind of end in the beginning. So you'll have to wait for another half an hour to appreciate. This is clear, everything. I'm going very slow because I want you to kind of be very, this now is the analytical part. So far was conceptual definitions and all. This is where the modeling really starts.
Sir, can you please
Yes?
consumption, that if you can explain it once more.
Consumption has two parts.
Yes, sir.
One is called subsistence consumption, which means even if my income is 0, I need to consume this much. I need to have basic food. And if my income is positive, then some proportion of this, say 80%, I will spend on consumption. I can buy whatever I want.
So then how is it different from the supply one, sir?
This is not supply.
Savings, sir. Savings, sorry.
See, if you have an income of say 100, you can either consume or you can save. There are only two things, which is what this is.
Yes.
And if I change income, suppose the income is changed by 100, that will be again change in saving plus change in consumption. So what if I divide by 100, what will this be? This will become 100 by 100,
Yes.
and this will be say 80. This is 20. So what will happen? 20 by 100 plus 80 by 100 will be equal to 1. So this is nothing but your MPC, marginal propensity consume, and this is not your particular marginal propensity save. Again, it is equal to 1, which is what I wrote here. So there are various ways to do it. I'm trying to simplify as much as possible because most of you are doing economics for the college for the first time, so you might find it very difficult. Anybody lost? Yes, you have to raise your hand now. Yeah, otherwise we will have a lot of difficulty because if the basics are not clear.
just the saving portion.
If this part is consumption and income is 0. So this is the same thing I'm adding here, but with negative. negative, this is not positive. Suppose the income is 100, this is 80, and this is 20. So actual saving how much?
60.
Minus 20 plus 80. The actual saving is 60 only. Because this 20 is not saving. This is saving. But this you are consuming away. And for this you need to make it adjustment.
Hypothetically saying that saving can be negative also. If you do not have income,
Yeah, like suppose in a particular year I am not earning anything, suppose I am unemployed. I'll speak with you that year my income was 0, consumption was positive, which is consumption, now that consumption is not part of my income. That's my saving. How I am spending it, how I am financing it.
so you are consuming it from others.
Yeah. It will be other, but it will be your past own income.
Or you are saving.
You might have saved earlier, so that you are now, it's called wealth basically, that you are saving previous years, and that now you are consuming away.
But if there is no income, why zero savings? Why minus savings? Why not consume savings? You are consuming.
You don't survive. If you don't survive, if you don't consume, you dead.
Savings. Earlier savings is consuming. That's why
You're consuming earlier saving, whatever you have. Or you may have borrowing from others. But like when you take a housing loan, what are you doing? You're actually having a negative saving, which you're borrowing from rest of the banks or whatever. Some people put the money in the bank. Whenever you take a housing loan, that's what you're doing it.
actually the cost of equity plus LPS is only 1/1.
Coming to the property, if your savings plus consumption is income, the change in that will be how much? Change in savings plus change in consumption actually should change in income. So if I divide now everything by delta y, this is nothing but your minus save, minus consume, and is equal to 1. Simple algebra. Plus minus not even multiply. Yes, everybody is still not clear. Yes, I hope you are not lost. You sounding a little lost. No?
He is lost in the camera.
Please, clear? Anybody at the last? Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So this is very important for me later on. That's why I'm kind of taking extra effort to make sure that everybody is clear. You will be fascinated in just 45 minutes. I can tell you that. Especially you will be fascinated. Okay, let me just quickly give you these other theories, so that I'm not going to spend too much time, but they are not innately very useful. But they are there in the literature, and that's the chapter of that. Again, obviously, Keynes gives theory, and Friedman obviously it does not like Keynes, so he actually gives the counter theory. It is actually no. Consumption does not depend on income. Consumption depends on permanent income. And how does he define permanent income? Permanent income is that income which also takes into account, besides your current income, also some kind of a windfall gain you may have. Suddenly you kind of got lottery. That is also your income. That is also subject to consumption. Or suddenly your business went bust. You lost a lot of money. That will also have impact on consumption. So he says it's not the income which matters, it's the permanent income which matters. Obviously, theory wise is very good theory, but obviously in practical part it's very difficult to implement. First, you have to get data on every individual, what is the lottery ticket they got, and what are they lost. Very difficult information to advise. Second problem, if somebody got a lottery ticket, where does the money come from?
Others say. From the others.
Like when you get SMS in the television, what are they doing? If you SMS, you might win the first prize. What are they doing? They're making a fool of you.
Earning from SMS.
They're actually asking all of you to contribute by SMS 2 rupees or 3 rupees, and then they will collect 500 crores of that, and then they will give as first prize 1 crore rupees, and then 499 crores share from. That is simple telecom SMS model, which basically with the TV companies they are doing every day, and people are now obviously getting fed up. I think now. So that's why you have to make program more and more exciting, so that people are forced to use their phone, and that once they use the phone, the telecom company will make money, the television company will make the money, and one guy who will make small money out of that, and the entire business of television and your telecom company takes off.
And they put you on hold, sir. Especially all your India TV type of channels, match upper half of the face and the lower half of the face. But I told my wife that you just watch. About 2 years back, it was clear who the two actresses were. And someone really got put on hold. And then stupid answers. हाँ caller बताइए आप कहाँ से बोल रहे हैं आप बताइए some stupid.
Because see, if you give a difficult question, very few people will call us. You have to give a stupid question so everybody knows the answer.
And it was 6 rupees a minute, sir. 6 rupees a minute because they have a tie-up with the telecom company on a profit sharing basis.
So now you know a damn model.
How much did you lose, sir? My life lost.
By default you lost.
But your income was not.
So that problem with that hypothesis actually doesn't add much to the problem. You take permanent income for entire macroeconomy. It basically balances out. Some people get more, some people get less. Typically, it does not really show any. So that still Keynesian hypothesis still wins over. Then came the relative income hypothesis. Relative income hypothesis says that no. People's consumption matters, but the consumption behavior of people actually depends on what the friends, neighbors, and your similar group, which is maybe colleagues, peer group. Especially you must be seeing this for children. If his friend has got a new PlayStation or something, the kid also wants it. Yes.
This when you extend it, you can extend it to purchasing power parity. Is there any
Permanent home.
Yeah, that's it. Is there any similarity?
No. This is just telling you that people are consuming not because they want it, they consume because the thing is they see somebody else consuming the same product. Like cell phone market, like iPhone. Why is iPhone doing so well? Because it's become a fashion statement. Even if you don't need, like every day, you're constantly bombarded with this kind of smartphone, and every day and then iPhone, people say it's an icon. And if you have iPhone, means you have the everything. And then what happens? There's a lot of social pressure. Oh, you don't have iPhone? Oh, you don't have iPad? Oh, you don't have iPod? So this is kind of not just for now telephone, but all other products are getting into similar category. But again, this may be true for very few products. You cannot say that it happens for every product. That's why again this hypothesis also came into existence, kind of a dialogue. But this is relevant for certain products.
This holds true for economy like America. Everybody spends because there is a
relative economic. We're not saying you don't spend. We're saying you're spending because your neighbor guy has spent this money. Can you say the entire product we buy is because our neighbors have bought that product? I mean, maybe few products which are like fashion conscious and other part, but that may not be a entire contribution. That's the relative hypothesis. The life cycle comes closest to outsmart Keynesian hypothesis. What is life cycle hypothesis? It's something like this. We make a graph. This is suppose any individual age from 0 to say a million for 90 years. That's the maximum age. I think nobody crossed 90 in the world. Then you have some few exceptions. But again, there are very few of those. So we can say 110 maximum. But again, 110 will be somewhere here. Very few people will be there. But again, and then this is your income and consumption. The moment you're born, you consume, is it? So the consumption is like a straight line. Or maybe you can say, as when you retire, it goes down like this. And how is your income coming in? Till you are at least say 15 or 20, you are not earning any income. So you are basically having consumption but no income. Here you start working, and then you go, and then suddenly when you retire, your income goes down, and it has to be slightly different. Your income goes down significantly. So then basically this period you are basically consuming but not earning any income. In this period you are actually earning more than you are consuming, and that is saving up for when you have reverse. That is kind of sounds very kind of a realistic, isn't it?
ductile only, sir. Just stand ductile.
Okay, up to 20 years, assuming normal case, you are actually having consumption. Consumption you're going up, but the income is zero. Up to 20 years, but at 20 you start working, your income goes up. I mean, actually for some people it will be even higher. That is, I'm just presuming that's the income, but the consumption is lower, especially when you are say 30 or you start saving. Till 30 you're not so worried. And after that, family and other considerations, parents, health issues, other things start coming up. So you start consuming, and then you're building up your assets in this period when you're working, and then using these, you have a pension fund, provident fund, whatever you call it, your gratuity, everything, and then when you retire, after that, maybe some people these days still work after retirement, or you're still getting some income, and then basically you're basically consuming more than you are being working, because you have past income also, which you may be using up, and so this becomes very close to the real world. But the problem with this is very difficult to actually collect data on. For every individual to find, so basically, information requirement is enormously high in this particular hypothesis. Although this is the most realistic, as in my kind of all the 4 hypotheses we have discussed. Which means you have to find every individual's age, then their consumption, their income. If you can imagine, if you have 1 billion people like India, it's almost impossible to collect the entire information. So by default here also,
That for the entire life.
yeah, and for entire life, that's another kind of, you can do it for 1 year, but you have to do it for every year. So that becomes a kind of a very complicated exercise, very costly exercise. So effectively by default, you kind of come back to again Keynesian.
Sir, relative value में क्या basically बोला आपने?
Relative, basically saying that the problem is not all the products are you consuming because your neighbors are consuming or your peers are consuming. There are little bit proportion of products which you consume without actually any, like you're eating, say, dal rice, you're not eating because your neighbor is eating dal rice. Or you're having a, say, this shirt I'm wearing, not because my neighbor is having the same shirt on. So there are all these products which you consume are not really because we're conscious of what the peers are doing. Although there are products which what company would want that you consume, and it is the moment you consume products which you're not looking at the usage, then basically you're wasting money and company is getting from that. How many people are using iPhone are using it optimally?
The hypothesis itself is faulty. Whereas in the case of
It's realistic only in certain products. It's not a fully realistic from the macro point of view, for the entire economy. That's the only thing.
but the last one is very realistic but not feasible to India.
Although the data problem is in all the things. Relative income also is very difficult with data. If you have to separate the product and then find each person who is buying the product, and then you ask him, are you buying it because your neighbor has it? Or it's very difficult to collect the information also there. Because it's not feasible. But these are some competing hypotheses. People, and there is some realism in every theory. But again, just because it's realistic doesn't mean actually you'll be able to prove it for the entire country as a whole. You can prove it for small, suppose I do a survey of all of you, and I pick up, I can possibly tell you which theories are realistic in this group. But can I say it for the entire population? They are not really. And this one is the easiest to do. With the income, GDP information is available, consumption information is available. And then I can just do a simple estimation. Yeah.
Second one was negated on what permanent income.
Permanent income is a problem is if one person is getting lottery tickets. Then how is lottery ticket money coming from? Coming from everybody else. So it means negative for them, positive for him, the contra entry. So the macroeconomic being aggregate consumption. It does not show any such thing.
What is permanent? How you are defining permanent?
Permanent income is basically your current income plus your other income, which may be lottery, wealth, and all the other income. So that capital gains is all those wealth-related gains or lottery tickets. Or somebody, suppose you lost some business, some big money, that also will not be reflected in easy.
Zero sum gain.
Yeah, so that's why I think zero sum gain. So why should we kind of worry about it when this one is already capturing that in a reasonable way? So that is the basic idea. Now hopefully I told you all the hypotheses and you can decide which one is the most realistic, but we'll stick to the first one, the Keynesian hypothesis. And now let's see what happens when you use that. Yes, sure.
So says that with every, I mean, I put it in my word, that is increase in income, all of it will not go into consumption, partly as per the ratio, and further as per the book says, at a point of time, at the back end, your consumption will also reduce and your savings will increase. Now, I have a situation out here where your income has risen. Like you have become very rich. You are now earning a crore a year. Your requirement of consumption is whatever level prior to that, say you had 100 rupees worth of consumption. Now with an additional income, your expectations grow. So my consumption actually will not follow a path. It will go that instead of having the normal iPhone, I go for a Vertu and pay whatever the cost of a Vertu is. So that will immediately distort. Should it not distort the?
If you really look at
high-end cars, I have 5 BMWs which I actually do not require, because I don't know what to do with it.
Okay, so that's a good point. Let me summarize what he's trying to say. That suddenly it may look like whatever we have discussed so far is that the MPC, first you said in the typical easy function, it's a constant number. You're assuming everybody has same, but this is average for everybody. So which means some people may have it, what you're saying, they will buy those very expensive phones and all, or Mercedes or whatever the BMW which you are seeing an accident every day. So I was just having a simple theory about BMW versus Mercedes. BMW is bought by the youngsters and the Mercedes is bought by the relatively old rich types. So that's why you never see Mercedes in accident, but you always see BMW in accident. Because people who are rich, relatively new rich, they don't know how to handle it. And so they mess up.
So generally they drive, and whereas
and the Mercedes is driven by the chauffeur. That's another thing which I was coming to the second point. That if you drive it yourself and you are kind of this power mind that I've got this money and I'm the most powerful, you're going to be very, very ruthless and kind of irresponsible. That's what BMW represents, irresponsible behavior. Which they might use it as the positive attribution for themselves, because they want to position their product like that. But Mercedes never does that kind of a strategy. So that's the kind of in a way they are actually not targeting. Mercedes is not targeting the new rich, whereas BMW is targeting the new rich. Which means now, after some time, maybe somebody will file PIL against BMW and tell them, if you are selling this kind of car, it's your job to make these people responsible, because disproportionate number of people are responsible who are using your car. It can be kind of one thing which, anyway, that's a separate issue. The second point is that we are not saying that some people have enormously higher kind of margin to consume, or some people have very low margin to consume. But even if you take the richness of the rate, when you find BMW, Mercedes, or even Ferraris and all, as a proportion of income, that is still a very small part. You must be earning billions of dollars when you are actually spending it.
Okay, I take it at a lower level. Your mates are he's earning say 1,000 rupees per month.
Yeah.
He cannot afford to buy a complete 1 liter pack of cooking oil for 600 rupees. That's 1 cent of a sample. So what she'll do, she'll buy a day's requirement or maximum 2 days requirement, go with the bottle to the kirana shop and decant 100 ml of water it is to meet the next 2 days fixed requirement out there. Yeah. So she's spending say 10 rupees of oil. Now suddenly she has her disposable income increases. Suddenly she is now getting 2,000 rupees. So now she will obviously spend more, and where she was going in for the cheapest of oil, she will now like to go for the sunflower oil or something of that sort.
There is no kind of disputing that. You are saying consumption divided by income. If you say that as income increases, are you saying this will increase?
No, I am saying that income increases, your consumption remains the same. You still use 1 liter of oil, but you will now like to spend 1,000 rupees on imported olive oil instead of using Saffola oil which costs 100 rupees.
No, that's not a problem. Nobody is disputing that. But this is in terms of monetary units.
So I'm saying,
So it means what this will increase with income or reduce that. See, whatever you do, it doesn't really contradict whatever you say. Whatever you're saying, you can have this going up, going down, but we're saying on an average, it actually remains in certain number. And that average I can pick up for everybody. And this will change every year. This year MPC was 0.8, last year was 0.9. That's quite possible. We're not kind of disputing that at all.
line will shift. When it is a 45 degree.
So this is consumption, this is income. We're not expecting 45 degrees. It can be anything. It can be like this. It can be like this. It can be like, but it cannot. It has to be below 45 degrees. It cannot go beyond 45 degrees. You don't like it, you can have it like this. You can't kind of it doesn't make any difference. I mean, we're just making a straight line for simplification, no other complicated. If you make it like this, then your mathematical function to represent this will be very complicated. And that's why it starts using that, we'll not be able to see anything, and we will not get anything new out of it. That's the only reason we're making a straight line. Because our understanding is, what does it actually tell us? That's what we're doing. Yes, you have a question? Okay, now let's do. Now in this equation, we just want to replace this. And all of you can do it and see what happens. Consumption function is there. Just put this here. And what will happen? We have y is equal to CA plus MPC into y plus I plus G plus X minus M. Yes? The same thing, and expand the same thing. Expand it. Or you call it NX. Yes? Not too complicated?
Not too much.
Now, you see y is here also, y is here also.
सर फुल में तो बोल
I can take it on one side. Yes?
क्या कर गया
Yeah, so I can take something closer to the other side.
वो देखिए ये क्या है ये देखिए तो
So if I write now get y 1 minus MPC, I can write this. Yes? And what about this side? All of them CA plus I plus G plus X minus M. N minus M. This is the same thing.
ABC की स्टोरी थी सर ने
It is same thing. X4 minus X4 or net X4 is same thing. Everybody with me? Now see the magic. Y is equal to 1 over 1 minus MPC into all this. Yes?
Yes.
Same thing, CA plus I plus G plus X, and same thing, I'm just not writing, but I'm writing now. Let's assume it means that trying to make the marriage by magic. Now you see, now the next question comes in. If any of these goes up, other than this, so this was, if investment goes up by, or government spending goes up, or export goes up by say 10 units, and your MPC is presumed is 0.8, what happens to GDP? If government consumption goes up by 10,000 crores, let's take a big number, that will be more realistic. If government spends 10,000 crores, even the NPC 0.8, what is 1 over 1 minus 0.8?
0.2
It is equal to 5. So, if government spends 10,000 crores, GDP goes up by 50,000 crores. Why? That's the magic. I hope I have kind of shocked all of you. I'm not giving anything. I'm still telling you something. Later. Anybody else? They are not going to spend 30%. Who is the most discretionary of these? Government. Exports will suddenly not increase unless you do something to exchange rate or something. How will suddenly you start? I mean, exports will increase gradually over time. You cannot do it immediately. Today I want to increase the export. I cannot do anything about it. Unless I significantly kind of devalue my currency or something I do. I cannot do anything to the export easily. Investment, again, investment depends on the rate of interest. I cannot suddenly increase investment in economy. But I can definitely increase government expenditure in economy.
You said 1 minus MPC is 0.8.
MPC is 0.8. So 1 over 1 minus 0.8 is 1 over 0.2. 1 over 0.2 is 5. Yes. I hope the magic has worked.
So you were saying twice.
Now your question. Now you know why we need all these complications. Which are very obvious complications, but why? What's going on? Why is it happening?
Why is it happening?
It's a cascading effect. Because
Why is it cascading effect? You're close. Yes.
the cascading effect is when the government spends the money on any kind of project or something. The money goes into the system, and the system, everybody down the chain is
Employment increases.
Now,
Employment increases.
you remember that government spend money means what happens to expenditure? The expenditure method?
Yes.
Expenditure goes up by 100 or 10 crores, whatever you say here.
Yes.
Now 10 crores when government spends, what does it do to income?
Employment
Expenditure goes to income. So if expenditure goes up by 10 crores, so income also goes up by 10 crores. People were selling this product to government. What happens to the income?
Goes up.
Goes up by 10 crores. And if income goes up by 10%, 10 crores, consumption goes up by 80% of that, which is 8 crores. And consumption goes up by 8 crores, what happens next? Again, your equation will show this part will increase by 8 crores. And of the 8 crores, people are spending more money, expenditure goes up by 8 crores. And of the 8 crores, 80% again you will spend because whatever they are consuming, that is expenditure. The moment you spend 8 crores, the income gets generated of 8 crores.
Yes.
The moment income is generated, this becomes again virtuous cycle.
Yes.
So from 8 crores means 6.4 crores in the next period again gets spent.
Yes.
So this process you add up 10 crores plus 8 crores plus 6.4 crores plus 6.4 into 80% and then so on and so forth. Then what happens? Ultimately if you add it up, that will equal to 10 will go up by 50. And that's the way the multiplier works.
So very normal effect of this was last year when the government came to this. The government spent a lot of money in the city, and all the real estate prices went up because people had a lot of money.
Yeah, here we are assuming all the prices to the bank. We are not saying any impact of the prices, only impact in the government. So I hope that is now fairly clear that why we need government. Yeah, the thing is investment also will have the same impact. Export will also have the same impact, but export and investment are not something you can do in short term. Export has to be a sustained effort. You have to create infrastructure for export. What are the products you'll be able to export? The right exchange rate, right your labor policy, right infrastructure. It requires a lot of other things.
They are also government role models.
Yes, to some extent. We have to kind of make the export policy in a particular way that you are able to. But you have to first be clear that you want to export. Now, actually, you can see different countries having different policies.
Some invest only.
Like some countries stress a lot on the government expenditure. What are those countries?
Scandinavian countries.
Scandinavian countries. Scandinavian countries, they export. If you say Scandinavian countries, do you know what is government expenditure to GDP ratio in these countries? Any guesses?
70%.
It's about 55%. And what is tax to GDP ratio? It's about 54-55%. So the net deficit is very small.
Yeah, but if this is the model, but there is so much of halla-hulla to reduce on.
No, that's not the only. I have to add complications. So, I'm just giving you a simplified model. Like his point was that why do we do something like that? This is a simplified, very basic model.
Sir, it is very clear.
What is it?
Any, like we can put it in a very simplistic way. To bring up any city, if the government makes a small investment out there, immediately the prosperity of the city goes up. You take it anywhere, so you take it Chinda, you take it Bikaner, any other.
So it means there are some countries taking this to a kind of a logical end. Some countries have a policy, like Korea, I mean, you have heard about it. After some years, they shifted that capital. Like recently, they have shifted the Seoul, which is the main capital, to another city, which is completely newly made, and then that city will be capital shifted. And that's the proposal in India also, like why should Delhi be this capital forever? Why can't we have Bangalore as the city becoming next capital for another 25 years? Or say Chennai or somebody else, Calcutta and all. Why should we have Delhi be corrupt only? Why should let's say that? Let Bangalore be corrupt only, let Chennai be corrupt, let Bombay be corrupt for some time. But this burden of politicians is too huge. Why should Delhi only bear it? Let other cities also share the burden. Or create another new capital somewhere, say in Bastar or somewhere, develop that place also and in the process.
This is based historically. We had that Mughal Muhammad bin Tughlaq. He had somewhere in Maharashtra and gone to the fort. Then he visited that capital. Obviously, he did not do very well, and then he shifted back also. Then we have to look about the fort and all. Yes, that the evidence of that. So I hope this is clear. Any questions? Now let's make it slightly more complicated, which I just added over here. If you bring tax, what happens? So what will be the new equation? Same equation. Now consumption will not be income only. It will be y minus t. So the taxes, so tax also has to be there. So the income people have is now total income minus the taxes they pay. Is this clear? I'm going to do another math. That's why. So I'll just change one small thing in consumption function. This income is actually now, we can call it YD or disposable income, which means income available for you to spend. So you have to, taxes are not available, so you cannot spend the tax because tax government will take away. Everything else same. Now just replace this here with y minus t. So your taxes now in the model. Earlier we did not have taxes. Now you have taxes. And how does the thing change? The denominator increases,
So basically this part will change. There will be another term here. Let me just add it immediately. N. So what will happen here? We will have another term called minus NPC into T. Rest everything is there. Just one small change. You open the bracket. That's the method.
Only y component can.
So you can add it here also. Yes? Only one small thing changes, rest everything remains the same. Notice what happened now. Let me just ask before I do it here. If government says I will spend extra 10 crores, but I will finance, I don't like deficit. I don't want to have deficit. So I will take 10 crores from you and spend it. What happens to you? Government is saying I will raise 10 crores from you only and I will spend 10 crores.
That portion less हो जाएगा. MPC times 10,000 crore will be less. So the growth will be that much less.
So government is saying I am raising 10, spending 10 crores, but I am taking away 10 crores from you.
Cancel out. So still increase will be there, but it will be less.
So will the yield go up or remain the same?
It will go up.
It will go up.
Go up by 20.
Go up by 20%.
Go up but lesser.
So my GDP will go with this. I have all the numbers available to you. 10, 10, and this is obviously not available. So this, what's the number here?
Say 0.8, 0.8, 0.8.
That's 0.8 given. So what will be the GDP increase by? 10.
No, I see. 10 minus 0.8 is 2.
Plus 20, twice with it. 5 into
10.
This is positive, this is negative.
Negative,
Positive of 10, 10,
No,
simple thing is actually calculate. Instead of 50, it will be 10.
there's no change.
One answer is 10. Anybody else has different opinion? 8. 5. 20. Four answers I got.
How?
Anybody has different opinion?
Why?
If you plug in the value, get the answer.
100.
100 so was not even the first case. So 0.
Out of box. ऐसा दो नहीं डाला हूँ अपन में आंसर डाला अभी 10 टैग नाम लिया 10 ऐड हो जाता ना
No one to which will be 1.
you think from
1 into 10. No change.
minus 10 minus
let's see the answer. So if you suppose you increase G by 10, what happens to the increase by 50? And if you increase the tax also by 10, so T into 0.8, 10 into 8, 8 into 5,
40
40. So that was the answer?
No change.
No, it changed. Then crores increase.
Whatever the government spent, that's it. 10 crore increase हुआ.
And ऐसे 10 crore तो expenditure increase हुआ.
GDP भी तो इसमें easy बढ़ गया. उसका easy बढ़ गया.
This is the second method. So even if the government raises the money and spends the entire money, still GDP goes up. Now you can see the logic of the Scandinavian countries. 55%, 54%. They are saying we will not really raise deficit very much, but we are going to tax from you and spend the money. So why should that increase GDP? That's mathematical. It's very simple. But what about logical? What is the logic? Why is it happening? What is the really? See, there is magic basically eyewash. Ultimately, there has to be some explanation, isn't it?
Because
income increase, employment increase.
taxes is increasing and taking back, so that consumption will reduce out there.
Yes.
It will not remain constant. You have added
That's already reduced. The consumption function, you already taken into away this income.
So you have got to now that P out there, you have used the previous
This
model of
is PA. This is PA. What I have done actually, already that what you saying. Y minus C already put. So obviously it cannot be magic. So what is the explanation? This is a mathematical way of showing it. But what is really going on? What is the English language explanation?
As the disposable income is low, the consumption is low.
Yes.
And so the cycle is now.
That is already reduced. But then why should the overall economy is doing well?
Because the money is being recycled twice.
MPC is reduced because of that.
The money is being
That is already taken into account. That we have already said here.
sir money is government is getting it.
So what is the detail? That is right.
But the government is spending the money, sir. The money is coming into the cycle and it's again being recycled back to the government.
But again, if you give the people the income, won't they do the same thing?
They will consume more.
No, they consume more.
They consume more.
They consume it once.
See, remember this equation?
Save more.
If I leave 10 crores to you, will you spend entire money?
No.
By saving, savings goes up.
If you don't tax the people and they got this 10 crores extra, what will you do with that money?
Save.
They spend 80 crores, 8 crores and save 2 crores. Which means the multiplier will work only on 8 crores.
The multiplier effect won't happen, no?
So multiplier will not happen on the savings part. But when the government is taxing away the money, government not going to save anything. Government must spend entire money. So the 2 crores which people would have saved now get consumed. And the 2 into 5, the multiplier, is 10. That is simple math.
But because of the government should not tax us. Instead it should expect because there is a GDP will increase 5 times.
Yeah.
Exponentially. Here it is increasing only by 10%.
Yeah. So thing is here, you are worried about the deficit. in this model, you think I want to increase the deficit, but I do not want to increase government liability. So I am kind of keeping that issue at bay, but at the same time helping the economy.
There will be no spending zero factor. There will be no government spending.
And if I kind of change the definition of how will I get
what are the factors?
but main result is really good. Yes.
Sir, the actual increase is 40 times, right?
Actual increase is 10, not 10 times. This is 5 times, 4 times. It's same as the increase in government.
So this model says Scandinavian models are good.
What is that?
That spend and tax, more spending.
So factor is the K factor for India corruption.
अभी नया
India में government spending is
there has to be some minimum.
No, I think see, if you bring in the corruption factors also, nothing to do with that.
We should adopt a special model where the corruption factor is already vectored into the tendering process, and the company who gets the tender, they can take a tax rebate on that. If they can be that transparent and Indonesia is quite a vibrant economy. It was in doldrums, but it has become quite a vibrant economy.
I think something similar was done. I think you might have read a couple of years back. There was a commissioner in Ghaziabad Development Authority. You might have read in the newspapers and all. He made this corruption transparent. He said that whatever you have to pay to the officer, you have to put it upfront. We'll give you the contract. And actually, he created quite a stir among the officials and all. They were kind of quite scared of him. I don't know if he might have been shut down now by now, but so he tried to do the same thing. And the other way, S.M. Krishna, when he was the Chief Minister of Karnataka, he tried to do something similar, but in a different way. He said anybody who's taking government contracts, one of the problems the contractors face when they actually have government contracts is that they are never paid on time. So he says, you do the execution, the moment you get the certifying authority saying that this is done properly, I will release the payment next day. And immediately there was a huge improvement in the infrastructure in Bangalore and Karnataka.
What is this? He has done it for Maharashtra. He was the road minister. So what he said was that if you can do it before time, then you will get a bonus on that.
And then he actually reduced the cost of delivery also by 20% or something. Because it is 20% extra cost which the contractor is charging to pay back the government officials because they delay the payment. So if you can actually get the payment on the right time, then the guy that I give you a discount on this contract. So a lot of these things exist, but obviously since they are vested interest, a lot of times these are very difficult to come.
How is Bihar change this model? In the sense that now the roads are visible, they have come up. Previously it was on paper. The mindset is the same, everything is the same. So how is Nitish being able?
But I think he has done a little bit. I've read. I haven't studied Bihar in detail. One of the interesting thing is done for the engineering department in the road sector and all. That anybody who performs well, he has something called foreign trips. You will be sent for training or some holidays. So that's one thing which are given to the engineers and all, which I read in a small case. But that's not the only principle. But yes, I do kind of make use of that kind of an incentive system for people to kind of be more motivated to work. Because he cannot really increase salaries and all because that's what is government scale and all. But he's created an extra training and some kind of holidays and all, which can be given to people who are performing well. Which can motivate people to contribute more than what they were used to do. But there could be a lot of other stories which are waiting to be kind of unearthed, researched about and kind of come out to whether maybe standard practices or best practices. There's an interesting article from Krugman's paper, which I show you some interesting cartoons. And there's some data also. And you can see that actually whatever this model is talking about, you can actually see the evidence of that in the real world. There is data for Argentina and many other countries, which might be useful. And this is an example of a bridge which was built in Japan called the Kashi Taiko Bridge by the Japanese government in the bridge photograph. This bridge was built and the traffic on this bridge is roughly about 5,000 cars per day. You know what is traffic in what highest used kind of a road? It's called Delhi-Gurgaon highway. It has the traffic of every day 1.5 lakh cars. That's the man is increasing almost by 20% every year. And this is a bridge where it's in Japan, which is a developed country, and the Japanese government financed this project, which is costing about I think $10 billion or something, and nobody will use it. But why did they need it? Because they have to increase demand. Nobody uses it. 5,000 people use it. I mean, literally, it was not really required. Japan has already all the infrastructure built. So where do you spend the money? Like in India, there are plenty of options to spend money on. You can actually have a parallel bridge to this Delhi-Gurgaon Expressway. There is enough traffic, but we don't have the money. Japanese have a reverse problem. Now, when you have the Delhi Metro being financed by the Japanese government at 3% interest, they are making huge amount of profit. Why? Because in Japan, if you invest, you get 0.25%. If you invest in India, you get 12 times that on a very concessional loan. This is Delhi Metro. And this is not so common for the exchange rate changes. The rupee will depreciate, the returns will correspondingly go up. So Japan is not really doing a favor to us. It's basically being very commercial in its outlook. And second thing, when you're giving loan to Delhi Metro, you're actually making sure that the metro rolling stock is bought by the Japanese company. Mitsubishi makes this in the world. And some other companies which are basically Japanese subsidiaries in other countries, they make it, and in Korea or in other places and all, and they are all kind of taking these. So both ways you gain. And the contractors and the initial contractors and the consultants to the project by the Japanese company or the Japanese government is that you have to have Japanese contractors or Japanese consultants on the project. So what is the law? That will help and still kind of be very happy.
So why do they invest more into the country?
Yeah, they have to be sure how much India will be able to absorb. No? That's another thing. Like they don't want to create India as another Brazil, or this is what happened in Brazil and Argentina. In the 70s, the petro money, which basically Gulf countries were earning, they invested in these countries. But that time in the 50s and 60s, Brazil, Argentina were growing phenomenally. So they thought, well, invest in these countries, you'll get good returns. But obviously, if you have too much of money available, then what happens is corruption levels and all also go through the roof. The unproductive investments go up and all. And obviously, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, all these Latin American countries, they kind of made a lot of kind of unproductive investment, which returns are not coming, or the projects were delayed, cost overruns, and then effectively when the money came to return the money, you didn't make enough returns out of that. And effectively not able to pay back. So that's why this country had this hyperinflation problem, related to this problem. So India in a way should be very careful about this extra money coming into the country. Because if you are not able to absorb that, and you are kind of using it and not able to use it, so paying the interest, but you are not able to use it. Like Delhi Metro is an exceptional case. But suppose Japanese are giving the money, you will be able to use it.
But we are also advocating FDI.
They are advocating FDI is what? FDI is private sector companies investing in India. Whereas the other, when the Brazilian all got the money, they got on a government-to-government account. And how will you make government accountable to invest money properly? Can you have any mechanism to do that? If you have the mechanism, then you don't need FDI and all that stuff. The sheer fact is that is not available. That's why Japanese will also not be willing to give more money beyond what they can actually make sure that they are interested in Delhi-Bombay industry corridor. What are they interested in? Not just the corridor, they are interested in the cities which come around there. Real estate and all this.
Japanese city which is coming up.
Which one?
The Japanese city which is coming up.
EMR
In?
Between Delhi and Jaipur.
Yeah, that is we are hearing from last 2 decades. coming up, never comes up. This project proposal is almost 25 years old, but it's not happened as yet. So once it starts, then it yes, that happens. Till then it's all planned.
So at the end of the day, whether it is private investment or government investment, it is good for us.
No, it's not good for us if you are not able to use it properly.
In the private investment,
So that's why we are saying FDI. You're not
why
taking
is government now so far not done it?
government has not done it. What has government not done it? Now we are from 91 onwards free FDI policy more or less. Anybody can come and invest. You have to take it, whatever sectors are there. But I think only there are few negative sectors. I think 8 sectors only. Rest all of them are free for FDI. You have kind of restrictions like in insurance 26%. And television maybe 49%. There are 8 or 9 sectors only remaining where there is a sensibility. But otherwise, other than that, you have a whole Toyota working 100% subsidiary, Maruti Suzuki working multinational, you have Toyota, Suzuki, Honda, Vespa has recently launched. So you have so many companies working in India that they are all multinational. But obviously we have some kind of maybe certain sectors where you don't want that. But again, the foreigners also not sure that India is kind of a relatively good market to invest. We have a very bad infrastructure. We have a very problem of law and order. Taxation is very high. Labor is very militant. All the problems.
Retrogressive taxation.
Demand curve. That's the same thing. This tells you about the government expenditure and government taxes. You will see in most of the countries, Sweden is the highest, actually 58%. These are relatively old data. Right now it's about 55%. 58.3% is the government expenditure. 58.1% is the tax revenue. France, Canada, Japan, and US.
Where do we stand?
We stand below US, where our tax to GDP is about 15%, and our expenditure to GDP is about 22 to 25 in that range. So we have a deficit of about 10%. That is only center. If you add state, it will be deficit.
Government spending of thing is more than the revenue.
That's deficit.
Deficit is only covered borrowing.
Firstly, foreign. Multiply, I think we already covered the multiply. All the countries of the world operate on deficit. Plenty of banks give money. Can we add to what? Can anybody read? These are the piggy banks flying to the farm. Oh, somebody must have balanced budget. Balanced budget, free money comes in. That is your, it's now it is the multiplier. Same thing is put in here also. Maybe question about
Mamta Banerjee was standing in front of Manmohan Singh with the piggy bank.
So that's Mamta Banerjee here, everybody benefits. About his point that why does governments have deficit? Governments have deficit. One of the reasons we have already discussed that if you have a kind of a you want to increase the GDP, government deficit is a very good instrument through which to increase the GDP. Because the multiplier effect is reasonably big. And if a country is relatively poor, then what happens is the government spends money and it goes to the poor people. Then the multiplier will be very high. If government spends money and goes to the relatively rich people, for rich people FPC will be
savings should be more.
FPC will be low. If FPC is low, then what will happen? The multiplier will be
Less.
high.
Lower.
I think you forgot the formula just now. 1 over 1 minus FPC. If this is instead of 0.8, I make it 0.25. The one on
Multiplier reduce. Multiplier reduce.
Let's go down. And that's why if you give tax breaks to rich people, like now look at the George Bush versus Obama. George Bush gave tax stops to the relatively rich people. So obviously the multiplier impact was very weak. You can have deficit in two ways. One is to reduce taxes, other is to increase expenditure. And George Bush did both. He increased the government expenditure and reduced tax to the rich. That's why this was one of the shortest kind of a duration in which another recession was in the US. 2001 there was a recession, and within 6 years you had another recession, 2007. Why did they do that? Why do they do that? Why do they do
What are the logic?
The logic of increasing the government spending and reducing the tax.
Because the impact is the same. If you reduce taxes, but again, to whom do you do it? Depends on that. If you are like in this present government, now let's say some positive words for the present government.
He put the country.
So you have to balance it. Although I'm not a politician, but see that this is one of the first cases in India since 1980 that the government was re-elected. Government was re-elected. This present last government is still in power. And one of the interesting things they did, which I believe is one of the important reasons they came back to power, they spent a lot of money in the lower end by Narega. By Narega, what have you done? They actually increased the growth of the economy. Because if people get extra income at the lower end, where will they spend it on? They spend it basically on domestic products. You buy food, you buy small industrial products and all. But if you give extra income to the very, very rich people,
Savings.
Not they buy BMW, which is produced not produced in this country. They buy iPad, iPod, iPhone, not produced in India. So the import component, which is negative, will go up significantly. And it was done empirically also for India. There was a study done by NASSCOM. NASSCOM, you must have heard. NASSCOM with the Government of India did a study, and they came out with a newspaper article and research report also that said that if you spend one extra spending money for the IT sector, the GDP goes up by 2. And they were so tom-tomming about it. I wanted to write an article and say that if you give Narega extra 1 rupee, the GDP will go up by 10. But again, obviously, IT industry is seeing as promoting themselves. They say that, so government should actually give more tax break to IT industry because GDP will go up by twice the amount.
There were 10-year holidays. They had a 10-year holiday which was
not expired. See, there's something never expired. Especially Narayana Murthy and all. You will lobby so well that you say that if you do this, then the industry will relocate to China. So the government has no option, and they will buy any argument.
There is a limit to taxes. I mean, if you increase taxes, your raise will not be that much. Because if you lower the taxes to a limit, again, go this to a limit, your raise will be more.
That's what left of government.
Someone who propounded it in the US.
That if you have too high a tax, this is actually tax rate. So this is the tax rate. So if you have up to this level tax rate, your revenue is maximum. But if you go beyond that, then your tax rate goes down. Then you go 90%. You go to 100%. Nobody will work. Say, I'll take away all your income. What will I do? I'll stop working, isn't it? Because my entire money will go. Now if you reduce it to 90, 80, 70. So up to 40% or something, it will be 30-40%. That is the optimal point. And we are near that. Yeah. And not you don't need public country. In the capitalist country also same thing. Yeah, the thing is, how are you spending on that? They are not spending only on people's food. They are spending a lot on people's. Yeah, the thing is, see, multiplier effect will be more strong in a capitalist country, not in a socialist country. In a socialist country, entire thing is publicly owned. No? So the private companies will not be able to get extra demand. If they get extra demand, they will not have the capacity to produce. Yeah, the thing is, see, take a socialist country. If the consumption goes up, socialist countries are always supply constrained, and capitalist countries are always demand constrained. That's why Keynesian theory cannot be applied to socialist countries. What happens in socialist country? Who produces? Public sector produces. How do they decide to produce things? There's a planning commission or something will be there. Okay, you produce this much steel, so there's nothing market determined there. So there's no demand issue there. Whatever is produced by a steel company will automatically be bought by the companies that are using steel. There will be no market mechanism. So extra demand if it comes in, what will happen in a socialist country? So demand is more than supply. What will happen in a socialist country? Import.
Corruption.
Import. You don't have the foreign exchange. What will you do?
You have to hold rate.
Huge black market.
It will be rationing. What happened in Soviet countries or communist countries? They will be rationing. If you have more demand than the supply, you say, okay, you come in the queue. Or unless you know the bureaucrat, you won't get supply to it. That's what happens. Because the market will not adjust to match the demand supply. What will happen in a capitalist country if the demand is more than supply?
They will produce more product. Supply will increase.
First, price will increase. The moment price increases, it becomes more profitable, people will produce more. But in the socialist system, this mechanism is not allowed to be functioning. So always there will be a supply shortages in the socialist countries and there will be demand shortages in the capitalist countries.
Sir, taking again this example that you have given, and that if you increase NREGA money at the lower level, your GDP etc. will increase, and correlating it with your tax structure. Let's look at the tax structure today, sir. 1.9 lakhs per annum, no tax, means if you earn say 2.9 lakhs per year, well, not to pay any tax on that, 1 lakh you have to save. That is almost 50% or 40% of your income, which as chap in that bracket he cannot survive at 15,000 rupees a month. So here, if you eliminate this slab, that is to say increase the slab further and say that go taxes up to 5 lakhs per annum, for example. So on the ADP, when the government gives you a more faiza, means what they have got from direct tax elimination, by reducing this slab, they will gain, there will be a windfall in so far as the GDP is concerned. Because that is actually the lowest status. The class B and the class C employees, they constitute the maximum number of people.
See, as far as tax returns are there, in India, it has been found, data is available. If you go to income tax department, they have given the data. About 3 crore people file income tax returns. 3 crore people file income tax returns. Of the total population, they are not over 3%. Probably that's not the right to look at. You look at the people who are in the earning capacity, 15 years or 20 years to say 55 years. So of that, there will be again maybe 10%. 90% people are already out of that. So what your concern is already taken care of.
But then I am saying is that your tax compliance will again improve. This is a very stupid figure of 1.2 billion, 1.1 billion is the population, there are only 3 crores of tax payers. What do you mean? The shopkeepers and all those things, they are 10,000 rupees per month, their children are going to K.R. Manglam school, as I call them, owners of Studios Auto Spare Part dealers. Their children are going to air-conditioned school. Mine and your children may not be, we cannot afford to send them to air-conditioned school, whether quarterly fees are 50,000 plus. So, who must be foolish in this?
So, what in a way you are contradicting yourself.
No, that's what I'm saying. You reduce the tax rate so that even the shopkeepers, they say that okay, that's the same thing which happened.
So, you're saying that by reducing the tax rate further, will actually increase the tax rate or
I'm not. What I mean, keeping the expension level locally, it is artificially low. I mean, artificial level of 1.9. They keep it at 5, then even the shopkeepers, they will say, okay, if I'm only 5.1 per year, I don't mind paying tax on that additional 10,000 instead of concealing it and also headache.
Okay, let me just give you some studies have been done on this part, and let me highlight those studies. I've not done, but there are institutions, there's an institute called National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, which does draw these studies which you are looking for, and they found that people, suppose I am an individual, I am used to not paying tax. If you reduce the tax rate, will you start paying?
No.
That's the evidence they found. That by reducing the tax rate also, people who don't pay or used to not pay are not going to pay.
But the compliance level, when we put it down to the historical pre-slab rate, the compliance level will not have dramatically.
Compliance level, if you really take this 3 crore people are filing, 90 or 80% of that are basically people like you and me, who don't have insurance. So it's not a compliance that improved any better.
Sorry?
Most of us would not really, people who are flouting the rules. If earlier I was saving 90% of my income, now I'm saving 30% of income, I'm still not into it. So basically your concern is right, that why in this country, with so many people who are earning income, they are not reporting. The only reason is not the tax rate. The reason is a very lax administration, or very corrupt administration. put it in a more kind of a rude language. Basically, income tax officers who are making money, they are not going to give up just because you reduce the taxes. You have to make your tax system so transparent, so easy to follow that it's kind of a everybody has an incentive to. And then, like, why this compliance increase? Another reason I think you missed the point. When Chidambaram was the finance minister, I think he took a scheme 651. If you have anything, mobile phone, car, or house, if you have any of these things, you have to file a tax return. I don't care. So immediately, people who had these things, they have to file a return. And then a lot of people who are filing return doesn't mean actually big taxes. It's very possible that you file return and say I don't have any income to show. So that's why I'm just filing return because I'm supposed to, but I'm not paying tax.
Might as well pay to CA than to the government.
Voted also. That is the reason why he did it. At period of 5 to 6 years was concentrated on building your databases and your information network so far as the SSDs are concerned. Even the 1997-98 black money deal with Siddhartha, the voluntary what was that for? That was basically now they are using that information now. Again, you need a complicated document. You have got a joint property, उसका PAN number होगा, किसके साथ है, कितना शेयर है, agreement है कि नहीं, verbal contract है.
So all these things, that's the problem. Tax system has to be very simple, and administration has to be very tight. You need to have a random check every year and to find out people who are the incomes or whatever they are. And people, obviously, a lot of people are capable of paying and are not paying. The problem is administration side, collection mechanisms not be raised. Right now, our rates are as competitive as the world. And take low income and high income, how much you pay taxes? On an average, it's not more than 17%. On an average, because you're paying 10% up to certain level, then 20%, then 30%. So average comes out to it, and 17% is the reason.
The direct tax is what is the percentage of direct and indirect taxes of the country?
In our country right now, the proportion is almost equal at the central level. At the central government election, 55% is direct taxes, 45% is the indirect taxes. But the state level is the opposite. State level mostly 80%, 85% is indirect taxes. Direct tax is very small. Because most of the income tax and all is paid by central government. That's by obvious. There is chapter also. Yeah. The other worry which is there last minute, the government deficit is too much, then you have a problem of debt. The government collects a lot of money. And I think that answers this question also, that government deficit is typically financed by borrowing. Whenever you are buying a, say, Kisan Vikas Patra in post office or necessary certificate, that money actually goes to finance the deficit of the government of India or the state government which may be funding the money. And whenever you are giving money to the bank, part of it banks may also park it in the government asset. Why do you do it? Because that's the safest investment. One is compliance, the other is also it's the safest. You will give it to private individuals, that guy may default, but government cannot default. Your returns may be higher, lower in the government thing. And if the deficit is one of the important reasons through which the government use it to come out of recession. So when a recession there, and if the US is there a deficit, this is the interwar period, and after that the deficit has been low. But interwar period, the US deficit does 30%, which is kind of a possibly highest in the world. And the debt to GDP ratio of the US.
Primarily more expenditure, less income.
Yeah. Yes, this is another chapter which I will put it here. And this is the actual multiplier working for Argentina. You can see this example. When the consumption went down by 0.6%, investment went down by 26%. Minus 1.2, 15%. Plus 2.9, still minus. And that is the consumer spending and investment spending. And this is the US. This is the and this is the consumption function for different factories. And it has been found that the consumption function is this is your substrate consumption, and this is your MPC, and YD is your disposable income, Y minus T. This is actually estimation for the US data which has been done over the period of time, and for the different level of people income. So $200 income, 400, and so on and so forth, and this is the consumption of the people. So actually equations we just discussed after the hypothesis has been actually estimated in the real world from the data. But again, you can divide this into two groups: lower end, the upper end. This is consumption function, and that discussion is there here, and MPC. All that we discussed is all here. So this is chapter 11 and chapter 12 on this chapter. And it's there in your book also. It's not in so much detail. This one is in more detail because I find these explanations are simpler. You can add to more. That's where we end this up. Demand supply part was earlier we had discussed earlier. So demand.